Hello everyone, Career Transition Centers of Chicago is pleased to introduce you to today's webinar, Moving Through Change with Confidence, presented by Blanche Roberts. Today's webinar will serve as an introduction to the broader topic of change. We hope you'll be intrigued by the content and want to dig a little deeper. So for the following 40 minutes, we'll present you with an overview of this topic and encourage you to start thinking about change and how you can become better prepared both mentally and professionally for this inevitable event. Without further ado, I'm pleased to introduce you to today's webinar facilitator, Blanche Roberts. Blanche is a former client of the CTC and a senior consultant at Zarin Friedman Associates, which is a management training and consulting firm. They develop professional skills, sales, negotiation, presentation, and influence. Blanche's prior jobs include Treasury Management Consultant with PricewaterhouseCoopers, Arthur Andersen, and Vice President and Manager of Treasury Management Service Sales, Product Management, Customer Service Businesses with LaSalle, now Bank of America. And Blanche began her corporate career in international cash management sales and consulting with the First National Bank of Chicago, which is now Chase Northern Trust. Blanche has earned a BA at Dartmouth College, an MBA at DePaul University, and is a certified IPEC empowerment coach. Blanche has lived and worked abroad in Spain, Chile, and Brazil, teaching Spanish and English. I am very pleased to present Blanche Roberts and Moving Through Change with Confidence.
Great. Well, thank you, Nadia, for that introduction, and I am excited to be delivering this webinar. This is my first webinar that I'm doing at the CTC, and I really appreciate the opportunity, and I want to go ahead and have us jump right in and start with a question. So we've got a poll question number 1, and the question is, when you hear the word change, what other word comes first to mind? I've got 5 choices here. Hopefully one of them works. Fear, a lot more work, opportunity, discomfort, or anger. So pick one of those if it resonates, sort of what comes to mind when you think of the word change. So give it a few moments for the poll to close.
Okay, and our results. 80% indicated opportunity and 20% fear.
Interesting. So we have quite an interesting group on the phone today. That opportunity is the bigger part that you're looking for, and then also fear. So how interesting. Let's go to the next slide, because what's interesting is that humans are really complex and emotional beings. And so when we're faced with change, there's all kinds of feelings and thoughts that we experience, not just the 5 that we had in our poll, but others. And here's by no means an exhaustive list, but sometimes people feel guilt. Sometimes people feel joy or confusion or shock. The reality is that there are lots of thoughts and feelings, and all of those thoughts and feelings add up to stress. And so with that backdrop, we are going to look at the topic of change. And I have 5 goals for this webinar today. Most importantly, I hope to help you understand your personal relationship with change. And we're going to do this by looking first at what is change, what is it really, and then also take a peek at a model for change that might help you to look at it differently. And then at a very high level, we're going to touch on some ways that you can start to deal with change with greater confidence. And because we have less than an hour to cover on this topic, I will offer some next steps for you to go a little bit deeper. So, why would looking at change, this topic, help you? Well, I believe that having a better understanding of change and specifically your role with it, your relationship with it, I think it will help you reduce that level of stress that you might experience when you're going through change, and improve the quality of your well-being, your life, maybe even move through change faster. Find ways to be more honest with yourself and advocate for yourself, and who knows, you may even get to a point where you can support and help and coach others who are going through change. So now let's get into this topic. Where to start? It might seem silly to begin with the definition, but I do believe that words are very powerful because of the meaning that they carry. And I'd like us to be on the same page as we go through the discussion of this topic. So I offer two definitions. One is change means to become or make something different or become something else. And the other one is change is the act or instance of making or becoming different. Well, those look very similar, but if you read it, the main difference between the two is that one is a verb and the other is a noun. And why that matters, I think, is how you look at change as whether it is something that is done to you, is out there, you witness, or something that you do. And so I would like to offer a contrasting definition, and that is that change is actually both of these, but change is that thing that happens outside of you, and then I'm going to plug in a different word here besides change. Transition is actually what happens to you inside of your mind and your heart when you're facing or presented with change. It's a little bit nuanced, but I think that this is a more powerful definition, and also kind of interesting the fact that we are Career Transition Center. We're not really about the change, but really about helping people really move through and respond to change. And so however you call it, however you see it, I think this is so important. The fact is that the only thing that is constant is change. It's always happening. Things are always changing. And this was said back in the 500 BC by a Greek philosopher, even before Socrates, Heraclitus, and this continues. Indeed, I believe it's quite dangerous and naive to think that things will stay the same. I do remind myself of this quote every single morning because it's everywhere. So, since change, yes, it is everywhere. It's in your personal life, your professional life, it's everywhere you turned. I would like to distinguish two types of change, solicited and unsolicited. So the solicited ones, because these are, there are changes that you expect or changes that you plan for, that you want to have happen. For example, choosing a school, getting married, relocating, starting a hobby, taking a trip. These are intentional changes that you want. The ones that tend to be a little bit more challenging and difficult are the unsolicited ones. These are unexpected. You did not have any control of these. In fact, they can be very traumatic. For example, a car accident, the stock market crash, a dear friend passes, you lose your job. Now, to complicate things even more, not only is change constant, but the nature of change is changing. It's accelerating. I'm sure nobody needed, to tell you that, but the fact is that this topic of change is even more important because there's so many more kinds of change going on all at once. In fact, here are just a few examples of some kind of business, work-related items of change that you may be aware of. In the past decade, 30 million Americans have lost their jobs in the manufacturing world. In the world of services and products, companies that offer those products used to last for years, and now they only last for months, their life cycle. In the Fortune 500 world, since 1980, 2.8 million jobs have just gone. They don't exist anymore. And then how about this to put change into perspective? Just the amount of what we experience. If you lived in the 15th century, the amount of knowledge, of information that you would run into over a lifetime is what is contained in a Sunday New York Times, from cover to cover, the same amount of information. That's a lot of informational and real change that's really unsolicited. Okay, let's pause and go to our second poll question. If we drill down now to just the world of career, job areas, let's take a look at the change that you are facing right now. Here are 5 choices. You're laid off, you need money, you're seeking a new direction, you don't want to work for anyone anymore, you have too much idle time, you've lost your identity or losing your identity. Do any of these 5 resonate? Please vote.
Okay, we're going to give you just another minute here to answer. And 50% of our respondents said seeking a new direction. 33% A, need the money. And 17% indicated loss of identity.
Great.
So a few different answers.
Right. So we have a nice mixed group here. And I think that seeking a new direction is kind of interesting, 50%. So the folks who earlier said that they are, look at change as an opportunity. So very, very interesting. The point is that change is real. These changes that you are facing are real. And the fact is that the topic of change is so pervasive that over the years there have been many academicians, philosophers, all kinds of people really trying to describe what people go through when they experience change. There are tons of models out there. In fact, one of the most famous you may have heard of is Kubler-Ross on death and dying and the different stages that people go through. One of the challenges of these, a lot of the models that are out there, is that they have lacked the connection between the intellectual side of people and the fact that there's really also an emotional side. And so there are a lot of advances that have been going on over the years around neuroscience and emotional intelligence that are really linking the fact that it's not just our mind that goes through change, it's also our body, our heart, our souls, our spirit. And so, this change that we feel, it affects us everywhere. And so another way of looking at how we are affected by change isn't so much the change itself, but what really happens to us when we consider the change. And that's really because we all love certainty, or we want certainty. And so when there is change, that opens up the possibility that things are not certain anymore. And so we start to ask questions about, well, what's going to happen to me because of this change? And that is really what causes the stress. We really would like certainty, and when change shows up, all bets are off. So it's change, going through change. It's not a single experience. And all the models agree on that. It is not a single experience or an event. It's really more like a process that you go through, which means it's going to take some time. And a series of phases, if you will. One of the best models that I've seen out there is called the change curve model from the HRDQ organization. And I like it because it does integrate both the emotional and intellectual aspects of what we experience, when we're going through change. And they highlight 4 different phases that you will go through: denial, resistance, exploration, and commitment. And look how they have also overlaid that gray arrow, and it's curvy, which suggests also that this change, these phases, this process that you go through is not necessarily a straight line or linear. I am going to describe each of these phases in more detail, but before we start that, I really would like to invite you that as we do go through the model, to please ask yourself if you can recognize yourself going through any of these phases right now, perhaps about the job change that you're experiencing or some other change that you have gone through. I think you will get a lot more out of this webinar if you're thinking about yourself and whether or not this model even makes sense and has value. This change curve model, oh boy, well, I have to admit I have been in every one of these phases. In fact, I have wallowed in some of these phases for a good time, but honestly this discussion is not really about my experience, it's really about you, and I would like you now to learn a little bit more about each of these phases. So I'm going to describe I'll highlight the characteristics and the challenges and just tell you a little bit about what people experience during each of these phases. The first one is called denial. This particular phase begins with the fact that the change has started, it's been expressed, it's out there, but you may not believe it. In fact, you might even be in shock. And denial is really just a defense that people use against facing change. It's a way to keep them in the present. One of the challenges of being in the denial phase is that the fact that you deny that the change is happening or out there doesn't make the change go away. And there's also an interesting paradox. You may not even know that you're in the denial phase. You may not be aware. Others around you may see this in you first. And so what people experience in this denial phase, it usually shows up as avoidance. You stay focused on what is happening outside of yourself so that you can ignore your own feelings or try to hold on, to what's been going on. You may even blame others, and you may just frankly believe that you don't really have any feelings about the change. So, has anybody in this virtual audience been in the denial phase? Are you going through it now? Well, I'm going to imagine that I see some virtual hands because I certainly know I've been in this phase. Okay, we can't take the time now to really go in deeper on this particular phase, but I would like to share with you, we can't get into your particular feedback at this point, but I will offer this one question for you to reflect on later after the webinar. This is a question that might help you move through this phase sooner. If you happen to be in the denial phase, you might consider, why is this change inconvenient for you? Or said another way, why do you wish it were not happening? So take some time to think about that, and it could really open your eyes to what's going on in the denial phase for you. Okay, we're going to move on now to the second phase, which in this model is the resistance phase. No doubt that dealing with change, it's not easy. You know, sometimes it's easy, but it's not always easy. And we can certainly make it harder to resist change by resisting, you know, that it's even, you know, going on. This particular phase, you're beginning to wake up from denial. You're beginning to just allow a peek that, yes, there is change going on, something's happening, and then you feel threatened, and you still try to hold on to the past. Challenges of this phase, even though you resist it, it's kind of like the denial phase that isn't going to make the change go away. And so what's hard is sometimes getting to accept that what you are feeling about this change and getting that validated. It can be very difficult to do that for yourself or to have even other people validate this for you, that it's okay to be feeling the way that you are, you know, with this change. And so some of the experiences that people have in this resistance phase, they can feel very afraid, very angry, anxious, upset, and just all around uncomfortable. A lot of doubt surfaces. They may even get angry and ask, why me? Complain to others, feel very depressed, and really feel helpless and powerless and just all around negative. In this resistance phase, you really do start to wake up a little bit to the fact that there is change, but you still really just don't want to. Anybody in the virtual space going through this phase right now? If so, this question might provide you with some insight. What is the worst thing that could happen because of this change for you, and how likely is it? I really do believe that when you reflect on questions like these, you get to tap into your own wisdom, because you're the only one that really knows what you're struggling with this change. So now to the third phase, which is called the exploration phase. You're still anxious about the change, but now you have begun to accept that the change is real. You stop arguing with it. And you also start to accept a little bit about how you feel about it. And you even open yourself up and are willing to maybe learn some new ways, take some steps, get help, and just pursue alternatives. Challenges of this phase, very interesting, very different, because now it can be very chaotic because you are starting to open things up. In fact, we might even call that, instead of it just being pure anxiety, it's a form of positive anxiety, in that you are anxious, but you're using that anxiety in a very positive way, making you, spur you on to action, but it can feel very chaotic. And so you're feeling a little bit stronger, have more hope, a lot of energy, a lot of excitement sometimes in this exploration phase, and you're starting to ask, how can I make this work? How can I look at this situation now from different perspectives? So if you're in the exploration phase, then here's a question for you to consider. What do you need to learn to move forward? What kinds of new behaviors and new skills would really help you? And what do you need from the people around you? So consider that. Moving on to the fourth phase, which is called the commitment phase. This is where you are really emerging and embracing this new norm, which is this new change now being integrated into your life. You're starting to see the change. It's really real, and you're feeling successful about the things that you are learning and how you are taking this change into your life. And you're feeling you're much more decisive. Here's one of the risks, one of the real challenges of this phase. Since you're feeling successful and you're like, I'm making it through, you may be deluded to think that you're done, that that's it. Nope, the change, I'm done, I'm in a new place, I'm settled. Actually, no. Can't get too comfortable, because we already know that the only thing that is constant is change. This is one of the risks of getting to this commitment phase. And how people experience this particular phase, they are very motivated, feel very confident, like they are in control, they know what to do, and are very accountable and responsible for results. So, if you're in this phase or have been in this phase before, a really useful question is to say, what have I mastered? What do I have to celebrate? How have I grown? Because these questions really will help you take yourself into the next level of change that you will be facing. And you really do need to celebrate how you have progressed. Okay, those are the 4 phases: denial, resistance, exploration, and commitment. How about we pause here for a moment? Let's do a different kind of poll question, a little bit open-ended. Any surprises about hearing, this model and the different phases? So Nadia, we'll open that up and see what people will say.
Okay, we've got some feedback here. Yes, I think I've gone through multiple phases. Can I go through them simultaneously? That's the question.
What a great question. And if you remember the diagram with the 4 quadrants and that gray arrow, you could say it's definitely not a straight line, and you definitely could be going through some of them simultaneously. And in fact, sometimes you can regress. So be aware. And that's why it is, I think, important to know the different phases so you can recognize sort of where you are at. But it's not a perfect straight line, and you don't necessarily completely advance every single time. And everybody has a different experience. So, well, thank you so much for that. So that was the model, a model that hopefully will be a little useful to just seeing where you are relative to any given change that you're facing, sort of where you are at in relationship to that particular change. Let's now shift our direction, from talking about the model to now talking about how people actually try to move through change, and really how well they do that is related to skill and will. And what I mean by that is the will has to do with how motivated you feel about this particular change. And then the skill side of it has to do with how capable you feel in terms of knowing what you need to do or how to do it to adapt and respond to the change. So there's no simple answer here. We are each a mix from very highly motivated and lacking skills to highly skilled with know-how and lacking motivation. But another way of looking at that skill and will dynamic is how people see change personally, where they see themselves, where they see the change, how they might react, or just, feel helpless. And these are just some of the common dilemmas where people feel kind of stuck. I don't know what to do. I don't think whatever I do would even work. Or, I just like it the way it is now. It's not important. It's not critical. I am changing. Oh, I'm not, no, I am changing. I don't see any real reason to change. And there are a whole lot of obstacles in the way. And, I'm already overwhelmed. These are just another way of kind of saying the challenges around skill and will. And with all of these possible dilemmas as a backdrop, I have to tell you, they are not all fully 100% true. You may feel this or believe that these dilemmas are for real, but they're not. Another interesting way to view our personal response to change is to look at what we actually can control. I love this visual. This is Covey from the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. These different 3 concentric circles, one in the middle that is dark blue, in case we have somebody who doesn't have the slides on the screen, and that's the circle of control. And then when you step out of that, there's the circle of influence, and then when you step out of that, there's the bigger circle of concern. The middle, the circle of control, according to Covey, is where you really have the greatest power and control over. And in fact, he argues that successful, confident people focus on the areas that they can control. That is, the areas around change and its consequences that are under their control. And that's where they spend their time on what is possible. And so another way of looking at what's in that circle of control is there's really 2 main areas that you control. One is you. Believe it or not, you are one of the key supportive people in your own life. And in reality, we all have tools, abilities, and resources to bring to bear in that circle of control. And so you are the one who gets to acknowledge that you're even experiencing change. Only you can do that. Only you are the one who can honor your feelings and not isolate and actually respond in a way in which you have choices versus just automatically reacting. And so you also have many other resources to bring to bear in that circle of control when you are facing change that involve the mind, heart, body, and spirit. And so let's look at some of these. Some of your resources, and these really are your resources which you may simply not be aware of. Let's talk about the mind, the cognitive, rational side of you. That first one, thoughts. Are you even aware that you think 50,000 to 70,000 thoughts a day? I mean, that's kind of scary. Most of them we're not even aware of, and I know there are a lot of them that are very, very negative and are not very helpful to me in that circle of control. But the key is that that is a resource, the way you think, what you believe. And we all know that negativity is contagious, and that self-talk may not help you as much as possible to deal with change. And so setting goals, really looking at your strengths, affirming yourself. There are a lot of resources, and some of these are resources that are underdeveloped. If we look at the emotional side of you in that circle of control, your feelings, you have them. Whether you deny them or not, They are indicators of what matters to you and what you need to address. And resources that you have include journaling, some of the reflection exercises like the questions that I've shared with you throughout this presentation. Those help you get at the heart of some of the things that you can control and need to control when you are facing change. And tools like humor, music, these are all resources to help you when you're facing change. On the body, the physical side, well, your health is a strength and a resource to you. Obviously, if you do not feel well, if you have symptoms, if you're not sleeping well, if you're not eating well, you're not going to be able to handle change as you might like to. And so this also includes the material resources, that the physical resources, whether it's food, shelter, clothing, whatever you need to help you deal with change. And then last but not least, the spiritual side of you. This is that side of you that is truly a resource when you're facing change, in knowing that you are not alone. There is a bigger perspective here. In fact, some might argue that this change that you're about to face or wanting to embrace or trying to embrace, that there's a gift in it and that there is even something to be grateful for. And this is where volunteering, random acts of kindness can help you be stronger in that circle of control. And the last one, notice, is faith. And I put in parentheses the word confidence, because the word confidence, when you break it down, it's confi, which means with faith. And since we're talking about moving through change with confidence, at the heart of confidence is you really having faith in that bigger perspective and that you will get to the other side of this change. Now, this list is by no means exhaustive, and I've thrown quite a few items here, not to overwhelm you, but just to shower you with all the riches that you have at your disposal. And many people use these. Perhaps you already have developed some of these and could develop, some of these skills. And then that's one area that you control. That's you. The second area that you control is others. Others? You say? No way. Well, I don't mean here that you can control others, but rather you can control how you engage with others. And the reason why this is an important area in that circle of control to really help you when you are dealing with change is that it is very important that you seek out and communicate with supportive people and avoid negative energy and ask for help and celebrate progress with others. And so others need to know how they can help you so that they can feel like they are supporting you. And they often need to be told. And sometimes you may need a different kind of support, that friends or family cannot do for you, like a coach, therapist, counselor, or spiritual advisor. The bottom line here is that there are others out there to really help you move forward with this change. And so another way of looking at, or this is a spiritual way of looking at this circle of control. I love this quote, and you may have seen it before. It's the Serenity Prayer. God grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. This is another way of saying that circle of control and what you can't control, and really where you can make the difference is in the areas knowing what you can change. Have any of you heard this before? Well, this session is quickly coming to a close. our peek into the topic of change, which is really a very, very big and rich topic. And I'd like to summarize some of the key points that I wanted to share today. The first one was that change happens all the time, never ending. Your experience of change is just a natural series of phases: denial, resistance, exploration, commitment. It's not a straight line. And it's normal to go through these phases, and everybody goes through them at different rates. And it's really not the change that you go through, but the transition. And so to move through that transition better, communication and engagement are key. This is not about hiding or isolating. And in fact, you have many resources and skills to help you respond to change in healthier ways. You have some of these that are innate, that you may not have cultivated, and there are others that you can learn. And it all starts with awareness, if you can get through that denial phase, to just acknowledge that you are experiencing change. And as I've said, sadly, there's no quick fix, no 10 steps that work for everyone. Sorry. But it's all about knowing what you can control. And since you really do need to be patient and compassionate with yourself. And since we only opened the lid on this topic, I would like to offer in closing some suggestions for next steps for you to take, go a little bit deeper on this that you could also share with your coach here at CTC. One is a handout, and that is going to include all of the reflection questions that I shared throughout this presentation. And then I would like you to name one takeaway that you have from this session that you're going to try out. I hope something touched you and resonated with you that you might want to do differently during this transition that you are going through. And then a third topic is another reflection exercise, and that is for you to just learn from all the successes that you have had in the past in dealing with particularly unsolicited changes. But list some of them, both solicited and unsolicited, and think about what worked, because those things that worked are probably things that you're going to be bringing to bear again in this next series of changes. Then, if you personally would like to learn more about your specific change challenges, like your style, blind spots, and even your strengths, you can take the Change Curve Model Assessment tool. And then I've put a list of some change-oriented resource books that you may find helpful to go even deeper, and including the Stephen Covey that I mentioned before, the Kubler-Ross on Death and Dying, and several others that really approach change from very, very different perspectives. So I hope that this session has served you well, and in closing, I offer my last quote, and that our only security is our ability to change. This was a 20th century scientist, John Lilly, who said this, and with that, I'd like to say thanks. I wish you well and more confidence as you face the changes going forward.
Fantastic, Blanche. Thanks so much. And I want to let our clients know who are listening to this webinar that many of the titles that she recommended on the resource list can be found right here in the CTC Center in our library. And the handout with reflection questions is going to be available on the CTC website where it says Clients Resource Library. So you can go right to that and download some of the reflection questions and some other exercises that were included in this program so that you can continuously work through this change model. So and we also have the link to our HRDQ, and you'll also find that in the Client's Resource Library on the CTC website. So on behalf of Career Transition Center Chicago and Blanche Roberts, I thank you for joining us and enjoy the change.